Welcome to Rising Up for Justice, a special weekly series presented by Rising Up with Sonali, an independently produced subscriber-supported program syndicated to radio stations, free speech TV, and podcast platforms. I'm SonaliKolhatkar, host and executive producer. Our nation and our world are overrun by billionaires and bigots, but they are few and we are many. On this series, exclusive to subscribers of Rising Up with Sonali and viewers of Free Speech TV, you'll hear conversations with change makers in the movements for social justice, and we'll dig into the nuts and bolts of values, strategies, tactics, narratives, and building power. This week on Rising Up for Justice, I'm joined by ChristianSnow, Executive Director of Law for BlackLives. Christian is an organizer, political educator, trainer, and lawyer who spent the last decade building political homes, shaping law and policy, and training people in the spirit of the Black radical tradition. Welcome to the program, Christian.
Thank you so much.
So your organization, Law for BlackLives, has been described as a Black-led, queer, abolition-minded, multiracial, feminist, and anti-capitalist movement lawyering organization. That's a lot of wonderful things. When you talk to people who aren't familiar with, things like abolition-minded, for example, how do you explain what Law for BlackLives is and what it does?
Yeah. So when we talk to folks who may be unfamiliar, we just sum it up by saying that Law for Black Lives is dedicated to building people power for liberation. Being abolition-minded is with the understanding that anti-Blackness needs to be eradicated in order to achieve liberation. And that's anti-Blackness in all its forms, including topics like police and prisons. But for folks who are less politically tapped in to those notions, we just talk about building people power with the understanding that it's going to take all of us if we're going to carve out a new vision for our society that's just and that's transformed.
So if it's a lawyering organization, it's formed of individual lawyers or individual legal organizations? Who is Law for BlackLives?
Yeah, so Law for Black Lives is a national organization, and we work to build and steward this network. The network is formed of individual lawyers, but also organizations that are locally rooted. We're working to bring together rigorously and radically dedicated lawyers and legal advocates. So not just those who can practice in the courtroom, but those who engage in the law every day to operate in support of grassroots movements led by movement organizers on the ground. We're maintaining a legal infrastructure that we hope is responsive, action-oriented, and collaborative with those organizers in that vision. So we are made up of folks from all around the country, and we're issue agnostic. So it's folks who practice in the criminal legal system, folks who practice in the housing course, folks whose bread and butter is policy, legislation on the Hill, people who are focused on environment, whatever issue it is that is hindering that liberatory vision of a multiracial, engaged, democratic, and liberated society. That's who we're organizing into this political home to support.
So when we think about the law in the United States, so many laws, including the very basis and the fabric of our legal system, the Constitution, wasn't written with liberatory practices, wasn't written to benefit Black people, people of color, anybody considered not white, supremacist, etc. How does that inform Law for BlackLives' work?
That's a great question. It is actually the first thing we start explaining in our trainings. When we train lawyers and legal workers to think about this tool that's movement lawyering, what we're trying to do is get them to reframe how they understand the legal system and what it's meant to be used for. We try to get lawyers and legal workers to put on a power analysis and to understand that the law is just another power tool. One that can be used to build power, but also one that's been used to destroy the power of individuals, movements, people, and Black communities. So we always start from a historical analysis of what the law was readily used for and the harm that it's done and its capacity to do harm. But then we talk about the way that lawyers have used it to support organizers and organizations as they carve out liberation for themselves. So with this understanding that it is a tool, and it's not one that is objective, it helps reframe what's possible. And it helps reframe the lawyer's position from just what's objective or what the law says can happen, but to understand that we are making law, and we are adjusting the framework, and we have the ability to change it in a way that shifts the material conditions that folks are faced with every day.
I noticed that on your website, one of the issues does seem to be quite central, is the criminal justice system, or as many people call it, the injustice system, things like the bail system. Can you hone in on the specific issues that you have found Law for Black Lives coalescing around?
Yeah. So while we tend to be issue agnostic, we also are always focused in on what's impacting folks today, and what our movement partners on the ground are saying that they're faced with, they're up against. So the criminal legal system, as we call it, is a major barrier to the liberation of all people, because it captures folks and removes them from community, and harms them as they participate in the system. And we tend to say that the spiral of criminalization, once you enter it, it's very hard to get out. Even after you re-enter into community, you are more likely to encounter the spiral of criminalization once again. And so we work with and support the work of our movement partners on the ground, who are thinking about the elimination of policing in its form, the elimination or defunding of the carceral system, including prisons, or things like electronic monitoring. We're thinking about how to address harm differently, supporting restorative justice mechanisms, transformative justice mechanisms, thinking about what folks want to build instead. But for our broader issues that touch the criminal legal system, especially right now, we're thinking about how do we protect and defend organizations that are under attack and whose main weapon that's being used against them is criminalization, or the removal of their existence. We're thinking about organizers who are under attack, and once again, thinking about the tool of surveillance and criminalization of those organizers, as we're seeing multiple different executive orders from this current administration target them, label them as domestic terrorists, surveil them and their comrades as they work to change their material conditions, use the criminal legal system against them. We're thinking of Cop City, we're thinking of Prairie. We're thinking of organizers being pulled into deportation patterns, which is at the intersection of the immigration and the criminal legal system. So thinking about the ways that organizers are being attacked. And then we're thinking about the ways that community, particularly Black community, is being attacked. That's including the flooding of federal officers, federal law enforcement officers into Black communities, innocuously under the guise of the immigration enforcement, under the guise of stopping violence, under the guise of the state needing more support. We're thinking about the ways that our movement partners' work is being altered and impacted, and we're thinking about the ways that Black community is being impacted by these different modes and mechanisms of the criminal legal system. And so that's why so much of our focus of the work we're supporting is there, because it is the tool, the weapon that is being utilized to halt the forward progression of liberatory efforts.
How old is Law for Black Lives? When was it founded? Give me a sense of its history.
Yeah, Law for Black Lives was founded in 2015 by a group of movement lawyers who had been supporting the uprisings in Ferguson, Baltimore, and New York, who looked around and said that a group of lawyers need a political home, somewhere where they can stay politicized and in line with movement organizers, and somewhere they can stay skilled up to support movement organizers and build up local infrastructure so that in moments of rapid response, we're not building a vehicle at the same time that it's needed. Over the 10 years since its founding, since its establishment, we've supported efforts like National Bailout, Mama's Bailout. We've supported defund, divest, invest campaigns. We've supported campaigns against family policing, LGBTQIA rights. Um, we have helped folks do a power analysis of the political terrain that they find themselves in on a regional, state, um, level. We have spent time really investing in the leadership development and political development of a strong network of movement lawyers, as well as providing movement organizers with legal and policy support, research support, strategic support, and technical assistance.
And when you think about how Law for Black Lives has managed to work through some of the issues you were talking about earlier, are there specific concrete stories or wins that you can point to? It's not always necessary, of course, to have wins in order to keep working, but I suppose when it comes to a legal organization, it can be fairly clear cut if one has won a legal action or not, right? Are there specific places where Law for Black Lives' mark has been made?
Yeah, I would say we're a different type of legal organization. And so our wins aren't measured in the courtroom. It's not measured through, litigation or action won or loss. We don't think of our work in that way. We're a supporting infrastructure building organization. And so our wins are measured through the strengthening of our movement and the strengthening of those systems. Or we measure our wins in the growth of the number of movement lawyers, folks who've adopted this politic that says that they are to be a part of movement and not separate from or just serving movement. We measure our wins in our ability to say that we've trained over 6,000 movement lawyers throughout of our tenure. And they've gone on to support both their local campaigns, but also national efforts that if we put a call out, as we did last year for lawyers to support the defense of movement as they organize around getting out the vote, that we can immediately turn around 2,000 folks who say, call on me when you need us. We measure our wins in our partners being able to have well-researched, well thought through strategy for their local campaigns, that they have toolkits and tool guides, over 40 plus that we've developed over the 10 years that they can continue to use. We measure our wins in how well we're democratizing access to the law and how well we're creating a foundation of support that our movement partners know that they have access to and that they know they will be heard, will be seen, and will be understood as they're navigating the tricky terrain of the law.
When you think of your biggest obstacles, who do you and what do you identify? And I imagine that just especially since 2016, the landscape, the terrain has gotten more chock full of obstacles. What are the biggest obstacles that Law for Black Lives faces in your work?
For sure. I mean, the last decade have been fraught just by changing conditions. Everyone encountered the major shift of the pandemic, the political climate. And I will say that our biggest issue is that we're building slow and intentional because the work that we're doing is relational, and the conditions on the ground are shifting beneath our feet. And so getting up to pace, having the investment, the time to get up to pace, to meet the moment, to scale up in order to hold this infrastructure together is a huge challenge. The retrenchment of philanthropy, from the fear of being attacked from a diversity, equity, and inclusion standpoint has been a huge challenge. The pullback from the Black Lives Matter movement has been a huge challenge. I think we're all Black-led organizations are all seeing folks back away from the issue and the work, from the attacks happening at the federal level on race forward issues. And folks' struggle to name white supremacy explicitly has been a particular challenge to overcome. There are a lot of barriers to liberation, and there are a lot of barriers to building that multiracial, engaged, democratic, liberated society. And we're just seeing them climb higher as authoritarianism takes root. But even as we see those challenges, we also see some beautiful experimentation and work on the ground, folks envisioning new futures, envisioning new worlds, putting together work that's supportive, that's life affirming, that's caring, and that is inspiring us to continue on in our own work.
What you're just saying about the attacks and the sort of backlash, I imagine you can trace that back to the months after the 2020 racial justice uprising. And I just want to hone in on that for a moment, because it just seemed as though a mere 6 years ago, there was this very hopeful wave where people of all races, and especially white Americans, were on the streets marching for Black lives after being devastated at seeing what happened to George Floyd. And so much of the work that Black-led organizations did finally felt like it was being affirmed. The backlash was so swift and so stark and heavy that I'm wondering if you have an analysis of why that happened. Is it that the political propaganda in the other direction was just really effective? Is it because of social media's, the attention economy has just kind of given us this whiplash? It was so fast in both directions.
Yeah, so I would say a few things happened, at least from our analysis, of causing this whiplash, as you put it. Part of it, from our analysis, is that this is the historical wave we've seen in prior times. The Black radical tradition teaches us to look at the struggle as a long wave, a long battle for liberation. And so if we do that, then we must be students of history, and we must know that with every forward progress, especially forward progress in the racialized sense, we see an immediate backlash. If you think of the time of the Civil War, and then the backlash that happened from the failed Reconstruction era, the Jim Crow, if you see what happened after the Civil Rights Movement, and the attacks that then happened on Black folks in the 70s and 80s. Any forward progress that's happening, eventually folks start saying, okay, wait a second, is this too much? And so history teaches us to expect this backlash, and that's why narrative work is so important. Cultural work is so important, because we do have to change culture, we do have to impact narrative, we have to change the way that we're thinking about these changes to folks' material conditions in order to sustain them. But then additionally, in addition to knowing that history, and knowing that we have seen these forward moments of forward progress, and pushback before, what we were demanding in 2020, the dreams we were asking for, were things that were hard to imagine when folks hadn't seen them before. We were calling for abolition. we were calling for the building of an equitable economic society. We were calling for the elimination of or the defunding of police as folks know it. Things that people could not imagine, even though some of the realities we were calling to end had not been in existence that long. For instance, the elimination of ICE. ICE has not been an agency more than the last 50 or so years. Some folks who are still here with us know a world without ICE, and yet the moment we put that to a demand, it became something that folks felt was impossible, something that we could never undo. The lack of imagination or the fear of sharp changes also aided in there being a whiplash, and in addition to some folks feeling like we were going too far. But then lastly, the forces that we're up against, the very few who are trying to concentrate power, have a lot of tools at their disposal. Uh, they are already in control of the wealth in this country, of a lot of the political power in this country, uh, the corruption of the democratic tools, the eradication of the vote. They have mounted a very well thought out attack on those measures, and they've been at it for a while. And so, once again, we can look at that reality and we compare it with the history of what we know coming, and we can add in folks' inability to imagine beyond what currently is, and we can find ourselves where we are now, unsurprisingly.
Let's talk about narrative work. It's one of my favorite topics, and I'm so glad you brought up that issue of culture shifting is so important because we always need public buy-in for those policies that we've adopted to stick, even if they do become successful. How does Law for Black Lives center narrative in your work? How do what are the tools that you use around storytelling?
Yes, narrative work is so important for us, particularly because we're dedicated to telling the truth. Um, Telling the truth for us looks like starting from a historical point. It looks like naming white supremacy out loud, and not playing this game that many lawyers whose bread and butter is litigation feel compelled to do in order to make the case that's going to win the issue before them. We are starting from a place of we have to be able to name the harm. We have to be able to name what happened in order to really get at the root of the issue. In the Ella Baker sense of the word, get down to the root cause. That's what from Ella Baker, what Ella Baker gives us as the meaning of radical. We have to start with telling the truth. And so we think of narrative not just from a sense of how can we make movement seductive, although that is a clear part of it too, as Sada Shakur called us to do, but also how can we tell the truth and make it real for folks? How can we use compelling narratives, compelling stories, compelling reality to make folks understand why we need a new society, why liberation is the goal, why we should be dreaming up new ways of being together and being in relationship with each other, what things there are to undo. So many folks that we encounter think that a system, especially the legal system, is objective, that it is something that just is because it's always been that way in their lives. And using narration to peel back the layers and talk about construction, talk about where we started in this conversation. What a power building tool and engine and vehicle the legal institution is, only helps bring more people in to the cause they're given the tools to unpack these things for themselves, and to really wrestle with those tensions. We wouldn't be able to do it without clear storytelling. We wouldn't be able to do it without clear tools for connecting others with the importance of the work, and connecting it to their current reality, to their current material conditions. Narrative work gives us the ability to bring them deeper into this political home.
And then, do individuals have a way to support Law for Black Lives' work or join it, a newsletter? How can those who are watching this interview right now hook into the work you're doing?
For sure. If folks are interested in being a part of our work, lawyers and legal workers, policy advocates can join our membership, where they'll be welcomed into our political home and receive political education and organizing on behalf of movement organizations. Movement organizations can join our partnerships network, where they'll be able to access our resources and call us in to support their work in coalitions. And then everyday folks are always welcome to follow along with us on our newsletter, to sign up and keep up with our efforts, or to donate to our organization in support of that work. Every thing that we provide for movement, we do with low to no cost to them. And most of the programming that we provide for lawyers and legal workers is also supplemented. So we're always looking for more folks to support us financially. Everyone can learn more about us and find the different ways to tap in on our website at lawforblacklives.org. That's law, the number 4, blacklives.org, or by following us on social media on our Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn.
And we'll post links to those from our website. I want to thank you so much for joining us, Christian. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
My guest has been ChristianSnow, Executive Director of Law for Black Lives, and this is Rising Up for Justice. I'm SonaliKolhatkar, host and executive producer of this new weekly half-hour series, exclusive to viewers of FreeSpeechTV and subscribers of my long-standing program, Rising Up with Sonali. You can find out more at risingupwithsonali.com.